Alright, hello everyone. My name is Wesley, this is Woo Can Cook. Today we're doing a Japanese style curry that I like to use a little bit of white miso paste for. The recipe that we're doing is part of a series that we've been doing where we've been paying homage to a bunch of different restaurants that are here in the San Francisco Bay Area. The one that we're doing today is an homage to a recipe that you can find, or a curry that you can find, excuse me, at a restaurant here in San Francisco called Bazaar Cafe. So if you happen to live in the Bay Area, that's a good one to check out. Lots of good Bazaar Cafe curries going on over there. I think they still have it at least. In addition to that, though, there's lots of other fun stuff going on over on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for recipes or fun things to do, definitely check out what's going on over there. It's going to get annoying. As with pretty much everything that we cook, this recipe, or this particular dish, has a recipe that goes along with it. That always lives over on my YouTube channel, so if you haven't checked that stuff out yet, that's a fun place to start. What we're doing today, I think the recipe for this curry came out, that was back in maybe January or so. I think it was in January, something like that. So we're going to be taking a look at that recipe. We're also going to be taking a look at the differences between chicken and chicken breast and chicken thigh. Today we're using a little bit of chicken breast, almost exclusively because I ran out of chicken thigh. So we're going to dive into all that stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about Japanese curry, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least fun to watch. So we'll take a look. So I'm starting off, what I just finished doing was I just finished separating the whites and greens of my green onions. I'm doing things a little bit backwards today. So for our green onions, what we're going to do is we're going to use these whites as part of our aromatics. So these are going to go into our wok fry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to save those greens for our garnish at the finish. So it's going to go into our curry raw, so it's going to be the last thing that goes on top. So I like to do that a lot with when I use green onions, mainly because the greens of your green onions, they're a little bit more tender, a little bit more leafy. So if you were to try and throw these into a wok fry, it doesn't necessarily always work super well. Lots of times it will just end up sort of wilting. Kind of depends on how hot your wok is, but very, very often if you find yourself cooking in a wok, it's probably just going to wilt. So not going to be the greatest effect. So usually what I like to do almost always, pretty much any time that I'm using green onions in a wok fry, I like to set them aside and use them as a garnish. It's also really pretty, but also when they're raw, they still have a little bit of flavor in it. So if you try and cook out all of that flavor and throw it into the wok fry, you're not going to get much at all from it. Emily, yeah, how's it going? Yeah, no questions. That's totally fine. Thanks for saying hi. So these are our greens of our green onions. You'll notice that I'm cutting them on a bias here, which basically means that we're cutting them diagonally. And that kind of gives us these larger and wider shapes, which tends to be useful for things like garnishes because it kind of helps them pop out in the final dish. So without that wide bias cut, it sort of like floats into the background of your dish, especially if you're planning on throwing it on top. It works really well. Then next up, we're going to move on to our garlic, which we normally do first. So this is my garlic. It is a little bit old. This is what happens to garlic when it gets a little bit old. It starts sprouting like this and basically just comes apart. What that means is that the garlic is now trying to grow into more garlic, which is totally fine. It's not the end of the world. You don't need to throw it out or anything. Just all it really means is that if you start seeing it sprout, so if you see like little green things kind of sprouting at the end, that's a sign that your garlic is growing into more garlic, which is cool. But also maybe you don't want to eat that sprout, probably will cause a little bit of indigestion. I've actually eaten it before plenty of times, and it's generally fine. But if you want to do the extra mile and try not to eat that stuff, you can pick it out. And usually what I do if I'm trying to pick it out is I'll give it a good crush like we just did. And that will kind of like pop open and kind of remove that green sprout from your garlic. It's very useful. Otherwise, though, what you'll notice that I do anytime that I work with garlic, really, is that I'm giving it a good smack with the flat side of my knife. And what that's doing is it's crushing the allicin it's crushing the garlic open so that it's releasing all of the allicin. So you could kind of think of allicin as like the juice of a garlic. Clove of garlic, which is kind of a weird way of thinking about it, but that's essentially what it is. And it's also where all of the flavor of the garlic is. More importantly, it's where all of the flavor is going to come from. So That's really, really important, because if you don't crush that garlic, what's going to happen is it's not going to release the allicin. So what will happen, it almost doesn't matter, actually, it will eventually matter. But if you could throw in a lot of garlic, you could throw in 10 cloves of garlic, and if it's not smashed, the allicin isn't going to properly release. So you're probably not going to get nearly as much flavor out of it unless you remember to crush it. So generally, if you see me using a piece of garlic in a wok fry like we're using it today, you will probably see me crush it, because that's going to help us release the allicin, and it's also going to help us get all of that flavor out of the garlic. There are a handful of occasions where I don't crush the garlic. Usually when I do that, it's probably because I'm using it as some kind of garnish. So very often, or there's one particular fried rice recipe that I've been doing where we use a crispy garlic garnish, and that's essentially just taking a whole clove of garlic and then cutting it up into thin slices. And in that case, we're not actually crushing it because we're trying to get a really crispy piece of garlic. But in order for that to work, though, you'll notice that I'll have to use a lot of garlic. So probably using like 6 cloves of garlic in order for that to work. And even then, unless you're directly eating a piece of garlic, you're not really going to taste much. So very useful when you're using garlic in an aromatic wok fry like we're using right now. Just give it a good smack with the flat of your knife. How long does garlic stay fresh if left out in a container? It depends on a bunch of. That's a really good question. I've actually been trying to like nail this down because we've been like cold storing garlic for the food booth lately, or the food pop-up. And what I discovered, it really depends on like a bunch of different things. So it depends on how you stored it. It depends on what the quality of the garlic is. So if it's pre-peeled already or if it's pre-minced already, things like this. It depends on how fresh the garlic was when you first got it. All of these things, they like play a factor in it. But from what I've found is that like once the garlic is crushed and minced, unless you store it in a specific way, it will probably stay for like maybe a week and a half. After that, it's going to start drying up, and then I have actually used garlic that was minced like two weeks prior to when I used it, and then it doesn't really taste like much at all. It just kind of like fades into the background, and it's not the end of the world. It's not like it's going to go bad or anything. It's just you're not going to taste anything. So not the end of the world, but generally, if you find yourself pre-mincing garlic, you're probably going to need to use it within like about a week or two. So what I usually do recommend is if you do try and like what a lot of people will try and do is like pre-crush and mince a lot of garlic so that they can just take it out of the freezer or refrigerator and then kind of use it when they need it. Then in that case, what you can do is just store it in a little bit of olive oil, and that will kind of keep it fresh and like keep it like aromatic for a little bit longer. And if it's stored in oil, it will stay for like maybe close to a month. Yeah, so that will like be a little bit more useful if you're trying to do like all of this prep ahead of time. You can also do the same thing for ginger too. I actually don't even think you need to use oil for ginger. You could just go ahead and store it in water, actually. Yes. Or what some people even do with ginger is that, like what we're doing is you can freeze it, so you can pre-mince it and then just freeze it. And I've seen even some people will freeze it and then pre-measure it like per serving, and then you can put it into an ice cube tray, which is actually pretty useful. I don't think that the same trick will work for garlic though. Why do you crush the garlic? Oh yeah, totally. So yeah, we were just talking about that. So what happens when you're crushing garlic? So you'll notice, so today, right now, what we're doing is, this is ginger, so we're doing a fine mince on ginger. With ginger, because it's a root vegetable, you have to run through for the fine mince. Be very specific about how well you fine mince, because it's not going to fall apart in that wok fry unless you get this fine mince really, really thorough. So if you don't finish mincing and you just stop early and there's large chunks of ginger going around, that's going to stay in the wok fry, and then you're going to have big pieces of ginger, which if you like running into pieces of ginger, it might not be the end of the world, but generally we don't want that to happen though. With garlic, on the other hand, once it's crushed, it really just starts coming apart in the wok fry because it's a really, really delicate vegetable. So what we do is we're crushing that piece of garlic. I could actually run through it because we're short on a piece of garlic today. So what we do is we'll crush it, and then once it's crushed, all of the allicin starts releasing. So if you don't crush it, it won't release that allicin. And then what will happen is if you throw it into the wok fry, the allicin's not actually going to come out. Or it might come out a little bit, but it's not going to come out nearly as thoroughly as if you give it this really good smash. And so we'll notice when we pull the skin off, it's also a really easy way of peeling the skin off too, because it comes right off once you smash it. But you'll notice that as soon as we crush that garlic, you can kind of see it, it's kind of blowing out. Yeah, it's mostly blowing out. But once you crush that garlic, all of that allicin is going to start coming out. So you'll notice that it's sort of like coming off on my hands even. That's also like when you're like working with garlic, you notice it gets really sticky. That's the allicin. It's the same reason why people complain like when you're working with garlic that your hands start smelling like garlic. That's the allicin that's smelling like garlic. So it's and that's what's ending up on your hands. So that's really useful in a wok fry like what we're doing today, is because we're going to throw it into that oil. And then once it hits that hot oil, all of those aromatic flavors are going to come out. So I like to use it when I'm doing wok fries because they work really well as like sort of like the first fundamental building block of umami. So as we start like building out these big layers of umami, the first thing that we lay down is that garlic. If you don't smash it, but you do... Oh yeah. So yeah, if you don't smash it, but you use a garlic mincer, will it still release? Yes, it totally will. The main reason why I don't, well, there's a couple reasons why I don't like using garlic crushers. Some of those reasons are kind of dumb. But the main reason why I don't like using garlic crushers is because not all of the garlic will pass through the crusher. So you usually will end up with is like half of the clove, it stays in the crusher, and that's the part that you wash out in the sink, which kind of annoys me because it's a little bit wasteful and you have to use a little bit more garlic in order to get as much garlic as you actually need. The other reason that I also have a gripe about single-use kitchen items, so I was just like to avoid garlic crushers if I can manage it, because I don't want to have to also clean the garlic crusher. That's a personal gripe though. But yeah, you could totally use a garlic crusher, it will work perfectly fine too. We have actually started using them in the kitchen because it's really useful for really high volumes. So next what we're doing, this is my onion. And I'm doing a very large dice on it, so you'll notice that I left that root end on. So this is the part where the onion grows out of the ground. I like to leave that root on because what it's doing is it's holding the onion together as I dice, which helps us get a really even dice. You can also remove the root before you start chopping, but it will probably, the onion is going to start falling apart, which is not super great. So. What I like to do is leave that root end on, and it kind of holds the onion together while you chop. So there's been a couple occasions where I forgot, and that's not the end of the world, but if you remember, leave it on. All right. Next, we're going to move on to our root veggies. So today, our root veggies that we're going to be using are some carrots and potatoes. So these are actually russet potatoes that we're looking at, and some fresh carrots. So you can probably even leave some or both of these out entirely. I like to use both. You can also use one or the other. What I have always kind of associated with a Japanese curry is the presence of these two root vegetables, like usually both of them, but sometimes even just one of them. It's also like kind of what makes a Japanese curry so particularly hearty, is because it has all of these root vegetables in it, so it makes it super filling, especially since we're going to be eating it on top of rice too. So for our carrots, we're going to give it a quick peel. When I usually work with carrots, this is a good thing to dive into. Usually when I work with carrots, what I like to do is chop off that end here. So you'll notice that I chopped the tip off of my carrots before I started peeling it. That's because the reason that I like to do that is because the tip of the carrot, where it starts like tapering off really aggressively and it gets really thin, it kind of causes a couple of problems. The main problem that it causes is because it is unusually sized, is that it usually is just going to end up burning. So especially if you're using it in some kind of fry, if you're trying to like, say like if you're doing potatoes and carrots in like a home fry, for example. So if you're making like potato and carrot home fry for breakfast, usually what's going to happen is that part where it tapers off, it's going to burn. And then you're going to have burnt carrot because that part where it tapers off is going to cook a lot faster. So for our purposes today, it probably wouldn't have actually burnt. We maybe could have left it on, but the other reason why I don't like leaving that part of the carrot on is because I also feel like it has like a little bit of a bitter taste to it. So usually I just chop it off without even thinking about it lately. But The main objective when we're working with carrot, and I say this pretty much any time that we work with carrot, is you'll notice that the carrot is very unusually shaped. So it has small parts like this, and then it has large parts like this. So that's really annoying, or not really annoying, but that's like a hurdle that we have to cross, because if we're not careful, we're going to end up with differently sized shapes and sizes for each piece of carrot, which is going to be a problem, because if you have uneven sizes to the way that you chop things, you're also going to have uneven cook. So in order to make sure that our carrots cook evenly, we want to make sure that they're chopped evenly too. So that's a big task with a carrot, because carrots are inherently unevenly sized. So usually when I start working with carrots, this takes a little bit of practice to kind of start identifying. But when I start working with carrots, the first thing that I'll do is I'll sort it by shape, sort it by size. I have these larger pieces at the end, and that kind of helps me identify like how I need to go about chopping them to make sure that we end up with even sizes. So you'll notice that these smaller pieces of carrots that I was working with, I chopped those on a wide bias, so that's going to make them a little bit larger because we cut them diagonally. And then these really large pieces of carrot, I'm cutting them in half, and that kind of gives us these like array of carrots that are relatively equal in size. They're not perfect, but it's going to get us close. So that's our carrot. Yeah. All right. Next up is our potatoes. So we're going to do some russet potatoes here. You don't have to use russets. You could use whatever kind of potatoes. I actually have gotten in the habit of using golden Yukons, which have been really tasty because they have a little bit of skin on them, so you can eat that skin. The main reason that we're using russets today is because it's the one that I always have on hand. You can buy them in really, really large quantities and keep them in the pantry for a super long time. So I pretty much always have russet potatoes in the pantry, regardless of whether or not I'm cooking this curry. So that's probably, if you ever see me using russet potatoes, that's probably the main reason why we're using russets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start peeling these. So real quick, we could take a look. So this is the oldest russet in my pantry right now. You'll notice that it has started growing into a crazy alien monster. So this is basically your potato growing into more potato. So this is not the end of the world. If you see this happening, don't freak out. It's not an alien monster. Just pick it off, and then you can keep going. You could also put it in the ground. It will probably grow another potato, but who has time to grow potatoes? It will take forever. The only point where I ever really start throwing out a potato is if it starts getting mushy, or if you start seeing it molding. But otherwise, if it has like growths on it, or if it's looking a little bit wrinkled, or if it's kind of like not quite looking fresh, it's probably going to be fine. That's why potatoes are so pantry friendly, is because they will stay in the pantry for a real long time. Even when they start growing stuff. So it's useful. Yeah. So that's also the reason. That's the same reason why there's always potatoes in my pantries, because, or there's always russets in my pantry, because they're probably there for a really long time. So that particular potato that we just finished cutting, I think that was there for probably close to a month, and it's still perfectly fine. All right. Potatoes also, though, they are very, very dirty. So usually, remember that a potato just comes straight out of the ground. It is a root vegetable, so they are really, really dirty. They're literally covered in dirt. So I always like to give them a good wash, or at the very least, give them a good rinse before we move on. And that is our potato. All right, so finally we can take a look. These are our finished peeled potatoes. So you'll notice that over the potatoes that I literally just finished peeling, I threw these immediately into a bowl of water. So the reason that I'm doing that, it's not because we're trying to rinse starch off, although we do want to rinse starch off. The reason that I'm doing that is because potatoes, especially russet potatoes, they oxidize very quickly. Russet potato will start oxidizing within 5 minutes. So, which means when I say oxidize, what it means is that it's going to start turning a weird color. It's not the end of the world, especially in a curry, because it's going to start, once it's in the pot, it's all going to turn yellow because it's curry. But especially if you're doing like hash browns or something, definitely keep those things stored in water. Otherwise, it's going to start oxidizing. You're going to have pink hash browns, which is not super attractive. Alright, so next up what I'm going to do for my potatoes, and I have gotten in the habit of doing this pretty much any time that I work with a russet. The big problem that I have with russets is that you'll notice that because it is a tuber, it has this shape to it where it tapers off on the end here. So we want to pay attention to this. So this side right here, if we don't chop this off, it will burn. And that's kind of annoying. It's not the end of the world, especially in a curry like what we're doing. But what I've gotten in the habit of doing is just chopping that edge off so that it will cook evenly. So if we don't chop it off, it will burn. So let's chop it off. And then from there, our objective is just make sure that these potatoes are chopped in the same size and shape as the carrots that we just finished chopping. Yeah, put it in some water and it'll firm up. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, I love potatoes because they're super pantry friendly. They will stay forever. I've had potatoes that stay in the pantry for like over a month, sometimes probably longer than that even, and they will stay for a really long time. They're my favorite thing to keep in the pantry. That and rice. So one more time, I'm chopping off this edge here where it's tapering off. And then we're giving it slices down the center and then going for our orange dice. Like so. Yeah. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning into one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on my YouTube channel every Friday. So if you haven't caught one of these streams, every Friday we've got a new recipe that's coming out over on the YouTube channel. Last Friday we came out with a recipe for a Chinese crepe, which is called a jianbing. That's over on the YouTube channel. We actually didn't cook through that one yesterday. Or today. We actually didn't end up cooking through it, but lots of fun new recipes coming up over on that channel. So if you're interested in stuff like that, lots of fun stuff coming up over there. We're also working our way up to 4,500 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over, give it a subscribe. Lots of fun stuff coming up. That's also where that stream behind me is going to. So we're also concurrently streaming over on YouTube. That stream also has a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking. So if you want to find out what we're going to be cooking next, that YouTube channel, it's a fun place to go. You can take a look at what we're cooking next, and you can tune in for the ones you want to check. Cool. So that's the YouTube channel. Definitely, if you haven't yet, go over and check that stuff out. Lots of fun content coming up over on the channel. All right. So these are our potatoes here. You'll notice that I still have them sitting in water. Again, very, very important. Even after you chop them, you still got to keep this stuff in water or else it's going to start turning pink. We're going to hold these in water until we're ready to eat them, in fact. So, let's see. Yeah. All right, next up, I'm going to dive into my chicken. So most often you'll probably see me doing this particular dish with chicken thigh, for no particular reason other than I usually have more chicken thigh on hand than I do chicken breast. Today it just so happens that I ran out of chicken breast or chicken thigh, so today we're using chicken breast, which is going to work just fine too. The main thing that we want to watch out with, just like with carrots, also just like with potatoes, pretty much everything that we're chopping up today, I'm paying attention to the unusual shape and size of my chicken. So you'll notice here you can pay attention that the chicken breast had this weird little part that was popping out over here. It's also tapering off right here. All of these things are going to cause issues with making sure that we end up with an even chop to our chicken. So I'm starting off by chopping that stuff off and then chopping that part first. So here's our tapered edges And then we're once again chopping this up in the same shape and size that we were going for with our potatoes. Do I ever love the sounds of cooking? Yeah, I do actually. That's very relaxing, yeah. I've been told it's very relaxing to listen to me cook stuff, I guess, so that's fun. All right, so here's our chicken. What we're doing, now that we have chopped it into even sizes, I'm going to go for long, thin strips, like so. And you don't have to go for long, thin strips. It's just my favorite way of preparing chicken. I hate pieces of chicken that are chopped into cubes because it's just really unattractive shape. That's a personal gripe, though. Yeah. It's really smart to cut chicken last because of salmonella, yeah. I've found a tricky balance to cut between that. So yes, it is absolutely really smart to cut chicken last because of salmonella. It will prevent cross-contamination as you best can. The downside of that is if you have to marinate the chicken, you probably want to do it first, because if you want to marinate it, then it needs to start marinating as early as possible so that you spend the least amount of time waiting for it to finish marinating. So today we're actually chopping this last, so I am doing it last for that specific reason, because I don't want to have to clean the cutting board more times than I have to. But it also means that the chicken is not going to marinate for as long as it would if I had done it first. So I don't think I ever do the chicken first, mainly because I'm putting off cleaning the cutting board as long as I possibly can. But if we were smart and we were paying attention to that marinade, you want to do it relatively early, especially if you have a second cutting board. You could just get that second cutting board out, but I wasn't paying attention. Also, I didn't want to have to clean it, so. All right. So that's our chicken breast. And let's clean our cutting board. And just like we mentioned earlier, the main reason that we leave cutting that chicken till the very end is because after you finish cutting the chicken, it's the only thing really that you also have to clean the cutting board afterwards. So you don't want to go off and start cutting up carrots and stuff, because if you cut that carrot over raw chicken juice, then you're starting to run into cross-contamination. I don't worry about it a lot when I'm cooking just at home, because I'm not too worried about food safety when I'm cooking for myself. But the one thing that I do pay attention to, so we could take a look over here, is our garnish. So here's our green onions. The camera stays on. So what I'm paying attention to come on. There it is. What I'm paying attention to here, most importantly, is this green onions, because these are the only part of what we're cooking today that are not going to be cooked, which means it's not going to have the opportunity to kill off any salmonella bacteria. So whenever you're using something that's not planning on being cooked, keep it super far away from your raw chicken. So I have the green onions. Those are opposite side of the kitchen. Very important. Yeah. Do I like wonton soup? I don't eat a lot of wonton soup. I do like wonton soup. I just haven't had it in a long time. It's also like really labor intensive. So I've been like kind of planning a recipe for a wonton soup, but it's kind of a lot of work. Usually when I have wonton soup, or when I make wonton soup, I'll probably use frozen wonton. Purely just because I don't like doing the work to make wonton. But otherwise, it's also a really simple dish too. So maybe I'll dive into it eventually. I got a lot of dumpling stuff in the works. I've been working on a xiaolongbao, which is like a soup dumpling, but it's really hard. So yeah. Why not use separate chopping boards? Yeah, you could totally do that. The main reason I just didn't feel like getting the second cutting board. Actually, the main reason my second cutting board is at the commercial kitchen right now. So I actually don't have two cutting boards on me. But yeah, you could totally do that. Usually what you want to do, if you have two cutting boards, usually that second cutting board, it should be plastic. And that plastic one, I usually would say, is you're cutting on plastic. That should be for the meats. And then reserve that plastic cutting board just for chopping up your chicken. And then you can kind of toss it when you're done. Oops. All right. So for our marinade, we're doing a real quick marinade here. That was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, half a teaspoon of white pepper, and then finally this is half a teaspoon of cornstarch. So the white pepper and that soy sauce is kind of like my standard marinade when I don't really know what else to use. But what we really want to pay attention to is that cornstarch. So very, very useful when we're using like meat marinades, especially in wok fries, because the high heat of that wok, it's going to start turning chicken to a really, really rubbery quality, especially for the wok fry that we're about to do. So that cornstarch is going to start slowing down that exterior cook time a little bit, and it's going to prevent everything from turning into like a really, really rubbery mess. Left-handed, yes, I am. Lots of people notice that. Yeah. Tom yum soup, yeah. That's actually, I'm probably going to work on a recipe for tom yum soup this weekend. Tom yum soup is a really, really classic Thai soup dish. It relies more recently, the reason that it's like come into vogue is because it was featured it's the soup that was featured in the Disney movie, or maybe it's a Pixar movie. I think it's a Disney movie called Raya and the Last Dragon. And in that particular movie, the soup that they're cooking in, that's a tom yum soup, or it's like a fictional soup, but it looks a whole lot like a tom yum soup. And it's a form of Thai soup, but the reason that I have never actually tackled it, and we can actually take a look at it, I finally some. The reason that I have never actually tackled it is because I've never been able to get my hands on the single most important ingredient that goes into tom yum soup, which is galangal root, which looks like this. It kind of looks like ginger. I know this looks a lot like ginger probably, but it tastes super different. It tastes nothing like ginger. It just looks like ginger because it's also a root vegetable, but it's like the single most important ingredient in tom yum soup. And I finally got my hands on some, so I'm probably going to take a shot at some tom yum pretty soon. But yeah, to answer your question, it's basically a Thai soup that has like a lot of really interesting and like really classic Thai elements. Has galangal root, which is the thing that we just pulled out. Kaffir lime leaf, which is another really important one. Lemongrass, which I also have on hand. I've been doing a lot of Thai and Vietnamese cooking. This is lemongrass. And then the last thing, which is... I forget. But yeah, tom yum soup is coming up soon because I recently acquired the ingredients that I need to make it, finally. Yeah. Oh, lots of comments. Alice, what's my day job? Yeah, right now, so my main other day job right now is, so we recently started a pop-up based off of this series, actually. So that's been like the main thing that I've been doing lately. So if you're around, the pop-up is so if you're around the Bay Area, the pop-up is at the Alameda Antiques Fair every first Sunday. And we're also at the Hayward Farmers Market second and fourth Saturdays. And then we're doing a lot of other like catering and stuff. So that's a fun thing that I've recently started doing. All of that stuff, oh yeah, by the way, it's also on the website. So if you're looking for more information on that, I guess we can link that stuff. Is at the website. And that the food booth, the food pop-up is doing all of the fried rices from the Weekend Cook series. So that's been really fun. All right. Any tips about space management in small kitchens? Yeah. I don't have cameras over where the prep is, but I like the most important. So some people have pointed. I never actually realized how small my kitchen was until people pointed it out to me, and then I realized that like, oh yeah, I guess it is kind of a small kitchen. But yeah, the main thing that I like to make sure that I do in order to make the smaller size of the kitchen more workable is to just have everything out already. So the first thing that I do, even before I start the stream, the first thing that I'll do is I'll take all of the ingredients out. So that's what's going on over here. So next to me right here, this is my sink, and then next to it is a whole prep space that has like all of the ingredients. So if you see me walking over here and grabbing things like this mirin that we just grabbed, that's all sitting over here. So you very rarely will see me go over to the refrigerator or into one of these pantries and reach for something or dig around for stuff. I find that's really useful just to make sure that all that stuff is already out, because you don't have to like go and like shuffle around and move things around, and like if you're looking for a bowl but it's behind like a food processor that's behind another thing that's behind a cabinet, you don't have to be dealing with all that stuff. Get all that stuff done first. So the other thing that I always do before we start, anytime that I even really start cooking, is I'll finish doing all of the dishes. So if there's dishes in the sink, I'll empty out all those dishes first, just to make sure that there's workspace. So what I'm basically trying to do is make sure that my workspace is clear. So making sure that we have this nice, clear, and like distinct workspace that's ready to be used is really, really useful, especially if you're working in a small space, because there's not really other areas to work around. So that's really important. And just like making good economy with your workspace, I guess that's the most important part. So what I'm doing right now, I'm assembling all of these sauce elements to our curry. So we're going to add, this is what you could think of as the liquid elements to our curry. So that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of mirin, 4 tablespoons of sake, dry sake, followed by, this is going to be how many? 1 tablespoon of oyster sauce, which is going to be where all of our fishy qualities come from. So all of our fishy umami is going to come from this oyster sauce. And then finally, the highlight of the dish maybe, is going to be 2 tablespoons of white miso. Yeah. I don't have time to kill in the kitchen when I'm also doing beets. Yeah. I don't know. I just do both of them. I guess I do the music during the day when I'm not also cooking. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you're looking for the beets, that all lives over on the Woo Cooks Beets channel, so that's a fun place to check out. Take a shot. Yeah, I have to go get some whiskey. Actually, could use some whiskey. Usually I might do that. Why not? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the pop-up has been really fun. It's been like a really fun endeavor that just sort of spun out of nowhere. Take a shot of what? Yeah. So what I'm shooting. I'm not going to shoot this. This is a sipping whiskey. This is Monkey Shoulder, and I won't shoot it because it's too nice. You can't. Monkey Shoulder is a Scotch. I'm not shooting it. It's too nice. Sorry. Yeah. All right, so that's our liquid elements, and then what we're doing, I'm switching to a fork here. If you want to, you can also use a whisk. Probably should use a whisk. I like using forks because I have a lot of them and I don't have to clean. I don't like cleaning whisks. But the reason that I'm switching to a fork here is because miso paste, it's very, very clumpy. It's like, as the name implies, it's a paste. So what I'm trying to do is break up all of those clumps. So we don't want those to still be clumped up when it gets into our wok fry, because then we're going to have big clumps of miso paste before we start cooking. So we want to make sure all of that stuff is broken down. Shoot it! It's a waste of scotch. It's like an expensive scotch. Yeah. Charlie, yeah, hopefully that's helpful. I honestly never realized that my kitchen was small until people on the internet pointed out that my kitchen is really small. So it never occurred to me. I actually used to have a much smaller kitchen, believe it or not. And I didn't actually think about how small this kitchen is. But yeah, the other thing is like it's just about prep space. So make sure that you have all of your prep done. And it's also like sort of like the reason I have, like, when I work in larger kitchens, I'm a little bit less comfortable because of like I don't quite know where everything is. So I always feel like being familiar with your kitchen is more important than having a really large kitchen. It's just being familiar with where everything is and being able to move around it very coherently. It's also the reason why I like this camera angle, so like people can see like how I like move around the kitchen and like what I'm doing and like the way that I approach everything. Oh, it's your wife's birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Carrie. Yay. Congratulations on living another year. All right, so that's our sauce element. You'll notice I didn't do a great job of it, but most of our miso paste is broken down. And then we have this nice liquid substance going on here. And that's going to get into our curry. without clumping up. Yeah. Right. So over on the stove, I'm gonna get my wok heated up. Let's figure out how to change cameras. There we go. And then what we're gonna do, so very often people have pointed out, which is absolutely not true, I long cook stuff on woks all the time, is that woks are meant for flash cooking stuff. So it's done on very high heat, and lots of people think that you can only flash cook stuff on woks, which is not true because I long cook stuff on my wok all the time. I actually think that a wok is probably one of the more multi-use dishes or multi-use pans in my kitchen. It's probably maybe the most multi-use pan in my whole kitchen right now. So what we're gonna do is, the main reason that we're doing it in the wok. So I have also done this dish many, many times in a Dutch oven or a stock pot. If you don't own a wok, you can do it in anything that holds a lot of liquid. But the main reason that I'm doing it in a wok today is because I'm gonna do a stir fry before we start cooking in the wok, which means that we can do everything in the same pan, which is nice because you don't have to clean multiple pans. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna flash cook all of our like protein elements. So I'm gonna flash cook our garlic, our ginger, our green onions, and then we're gonna do our chicken. And from there, it's basically gonna look like a chicken stir fry. It's probably gonna look mostly like kung pao chicken at that point. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add in our dry ingredients, or add in our wet ingredients. So we're gonna add in all that stock, some water, all of that miso paste, all of that stuff that was wet. And then we're gonna add that stuff in, and then from there, we're gonna go for our long cook. So that's really, really useful because you can do all of your flash cooking on super high heat, so you get that nice high flash cooked chicken quality to your chicken. But you also have the ability to long cook it in the same pot. So you can do something pretty similar if you have a Dutch oven, because the Dutch oven gets pretty hot. But I like to do it in a wok because it's a little bit more comfortable for me. Zorjarishi, yeah, that's the Zorjarishi. But it also has a really long song, so I always cut off the Zorjarishi song because it goes for a super long time. It's like a full-on 8-bar phrase, and like sometimes I'll be sitting here and just like waiting for the Zorjarishi song to finish. All right, so I'm gonna let that wok heat up while we're at it. I'll introduce myself one more time. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on my YouTube channel every Friday. So if you're watching on Reddit, you'll notice that I'm talking to a bunch of people that are not in the Reddit chat. Those are the folks over on YouTube. That's also where all of the recipes live. So if you want to check out where all of the things, how to cook all of the things that I'm cooking, those recipes tend to be a little bit more useful. The one that we're doing today is part of a series that we've been doing where I've been reproducing foods from the San Francisco Bay Area food scene. So this one comes from a cafe in San Francisco called Bazaar Cafe. That's a whole bunch of food that's part of that series. A lot of stuff from the Oakland Chinatown neighborhood, fun things that I've eaten over the years because I've been living here for my whole life, so I know lots of food here. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely find your way over to the YouTube channel. Check out what's going on over there. We're working our way up to 4,500 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give it a subscribe. Lots of fun stuff. Yeah, thank you. We also, a couple folks were asking about it, but we also have a new pop-up restaurant. So if you happen to be here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a pop-up coming up this Sunday. So if you're in the Bay Area, we'll be at the Alameda Point Antiques Fair this coming Sunday, July 4th. So we're going to be there on July 4th. What we're going to be doing is we're cooking through all of the fried rices that are part of the Woo Can Cook series. So if you've ever seen me cooking the kimchi fried rice, the bacon fried rice, the lapchang fried rice, and the Hawaiian spam fried rice. Those are the big 4 that we're cooking in the pop-up kitchen, or the pop-up restaurant, so that's a fun one. All right. So over on the stove, I've got my wok. It's nice and hot, and we're gonna start cooking. So I'm starting off, this is 4 tablespoons of peanut oil. And then we're giving our wok a long yao. And then at this point, you're going to notice that our wok fry, or our cook, is going to look pretty much like any other wok fry that we've done. We're starting off with our aromatics first. That's my garlic, followed by my ginger, and finally the whites of my green onions. We'll often refer to those as the aromatics of our wok fry For this particular reason, we're looking for their aromatic quality, so we add them in first, and then they bloom out their aromatic fragrant qualities. So usually takes about 10 seconds. And then I'm following up with my chicken. The chicken, however, it does have a liquid marinade in it, so I'm being careful at this point because we are trying to wok fry this stuff, so I'm trying my very best to hold back as much of that liquid as possible. Because the more liquid that gets into the wok fry, the more trouble that we're going to have cooking this stuff on high heat, because that liquid is going to start dragging down the temperature of our wok fry, of our wok heat. So we did a pretty good job. That's all of the soy sauce that's hanging behind here. All right, then I'm going to give this a toss. And then we're going to let that chicken go. That will probably take about a minute or two. We don't need the chicken to be all the way cooked through, but we do want to give it a good flash cook first. Because remember that the chicken is going to cook in that curry for quite a while. So it doesn't have to be fully cooked. We just want to give it a good quick flash cook first before we move on. Yeah, as seen on YouTube. Yes, exactly. Cool, yeah, thank you. I love making content. All right. So, like I mentioned earlier, this chicken is probably going to look pretty much like every other wok fry that we ever do. We're just basically, essentially, at this point, we're just wok frying chicken, which is totally fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding my dry ingredients. So at this point, I'm starting off with, it's a little bit dry. I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I forgot that we're using chicken breast here. So usually when I'm using chicken thigh, there's a little bit more fat that's hanging out at the bottom because the chicken fat is rendering out nice fatty juices that would be down here. Today we're using a leaner cut of chicken breast, so there's no fat down there, which I noticed. So I'm going to start off by adding a little bit of peanut oil to get things going. And then from there, I'm going to add my dry ingredients. So this is going to be 3 tablespoons of curry powder, followed by half a tablespoon of turmeric powder. Turmeric powder is technically optional because curry powder technically has turmeric in it already. Especially that one, that was actually a spice blend that I made myself. But the main objective here is we're trying to get this to bloom out their fragrant qualities, just like we were doing with that garlic and ginger. So I'm letting it make good solid contact with that oil and letting it become fragrant before we start combining. And that good amount of time that it has in that hot oil is going to give it like that nice fragrant texture. Then finally I'm adding my root veggies. Where did my potatoes go? Oh yeah. Here's my carrots, then my potatoes, followed by, where's my sauce? There it is. Here's our miso mixture. Followed by stock. Half a cup of stock. I usually just eyeball this part. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of water. And then most importantly, well not most importantly, but very important, once there's all of this liquid in our wok, especially if you're using a round bottom wok, you'll notice it has a capacity to just sort of roll around. You want to add this wok ring down. Wok rings are really important when you have a lot of stuff in a wok like we do right now. Because without it, that wok is just going to roll right off of your stove. Not super fun. So once we have all of that liquid in the wok, we want to make sure that wok ring is down. I've got this thing nice and sturdy. And you'll notice that I also turned that overhead off because we're not really stir frying anymore. We're just kind of simmering. And we're just going to really be simmering off a lot of that water and liquid. So very useful to be doing this in a wok, because we could do that first half in that wok fry and the second half in the wok ring. Very versatile. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to let that simmer for maybe about 10 minutes. We're going to let it simmer. At this point, if you're really planning ahead, you could let this thing simmer for, it could go for up to like 2 hours, maybe even more. You could think of it as like a bolognese or any kind of long cook. I've let this thing simmer for like up to 4 hours. If you really want to, just keep adding water. The longer that it simmers, the tastier it's going to be. More of those flavors are going to start developing, and it's going to like really infuse more flavor into the chicken, and all of that potato, all of those soft flavors are going to come together a little bit better. In our case, I'm not going to wait that long. That's too long to wait to eat. In our case, this thing will probably only simmer for about 10 minutes. It'll be just fine. But I have definitely let this thing simmer for at least an hour or two before, and it gets even better. But mainly what we're doing, so my fire, it's still at very high heat. Really what we're doing is trying to bring all of that liquid to a boil. And once it hits a boil, then I'm going to bring that temperature down, and we're going to let it simmer for a bit. Yeah. Top food destination outside of California. Ooh. Internationally, my favorite one so far has been Paris. Paris was the last place that I went to before COVID. COVID hit, and it was, I think I was there in January of 2020. So, but yeah, lots of, just like, that's like the food capital. Like, well, it's like the classy food capital of the world. Maybe my second, or maybe tied for first, is probably Taiwan. That's where all of like night market and like street food like cuisine comes from. So that's like a lot of the things that you'll see on the channel, including the recipe that came out last Friday, that comes from like Taiwanese street food cooking. That's also where the pop-up is inspired by. So that all of the things that we're doing, it's cooked in the fashion of Taiwanese night market. So we have these big old wok burners, and everything is cooked at really, really high heat. So we're not doing any of the things that we have to do on this home cook burner, because those wok burners are going really, really hot. So we have this big, really high heat cooking all of this fried rice. So it's all of that is inspired by Taiwanese night market style stuff. So uncovered, yeah, I guess I could cover it. Then I gotta wash the cover. To be honest, almost everything that I do is inspired by whether or not I want to wash something. But yeah, technically I could cover it. That'll probably make it go faster. I also don't have a cover for this wok, so I use a sheet pan. Oh, but then you can't see anything. Now you're just looking at a sheet pan. Yeah. I guess we gotta make stuff anyway. Just curious. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. But yeah, very, very often, like 90% of the decision making that I do is inspired by whether or not I have to clean something else. I probably won't have to clean it that well. Well, that's going. We have one more thing that we have to throw together, so I am going to take care of that. What we're doing here, this is going to be our cornstarch slurry. It is supposed to be 2 or 4. It's 2. This is going to be 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, which I'm then going to mix in with a little bit of water. So the water quantity is not nearly as important as the cornstarch quantity. And the reason for that is, what our goal here is to just make sure that we're not throwing dry cornstarch into our wok fry, because, and this is a thing that I have learned the hard way, is that cornstarch, it has the ability to clump together with literally anything that it touches. So if it's not water, if it's not a liquid, it's going to start clumping, and then you're going to have clumps of cornstarch. And if you've ever eaten a clump of cornstarch, it's really gross. So we want to make sure that this cornstarch is nice and dissolved. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use this cornstarch, what we call this a cornstarch slurry. And we're going to use the starch from this cornstarch to thicken up our curry. So before we add this cornstarch, everything is going to look kind of loose and basically like a soup, but like a really, really loose soup. Once we add the cornstarch, everything is going to start tightening up. We're going to have this really thick and luxurious curry. So you very often will see the use of cornstarch like this, or some other starch. Very often you'll see things like potato starch. You might even see like tapioca starch. I've even seen like flour sometimes. Really anything that has a thickening agent, and it's going to contribute to creating that thick sauce. So I think of it a lot like how you would use pasta water in Italian cooking, where that pasta water has all of the starch that's coming out of the pasta, and you use it to create thick sauces and things like carbonaras and bologneses, stuff like that. With Chinese food, or really like most Asian food in general, it's cornstarch. Yeah. Cool. I think this is boiling. It is, and that's super hot. Whoops. All right, it's boiling, so we can take a look. So here's our curry. It is nice and simmering. I'm gonna let that go, and I'm gonna bring that fire down a little bit gradually. And then we're gonna let that simmer. Right now, we actually do want it to be uncovered at this point, because we want a little bit of that liquid to start reducing and boiling off. So I might at some point go back and add more liquid if it starts reducing faster than I'd like it to. That's totally fine too. Now at this point, if you were trying to give it a really long cook, so if you were say like doing this at like noon and you were trying to make it for dinner that night, you could totally let this simmer until like 6 p.m. and let it go for 6 straight hours, and just keep adding water to it. And as long as you keep adding water, it's just going to keep going. You're never going to really be at a risk of things overcooking. That's generally the quality of things like curries and stews and stuff. It's not really going to overcook. So you don't need to be worried about like overcooking stuff. Things are just going to get more tender. So the longer that it goes, the more deep and flavorful those elements are going to start becoming, because it's just sort of the magic of how long cooking works. So for our purposes today, this thing is only going to long cook for about like 10 minutes. So really what I'm looking for right now is I'm trying to make sure, number one, that those potatoes and carrots are cooked all the way through. The chicken by this point is already cooked all the way through. And then from there, once those potatoes and carrots are nice and like fork tender, then we can just start looking for the texture that we're trying to get to. The last thing also that we haven't added is our onions. You'll notice that I left out the onions in our curry so far. Come on back. There it is. You'll notice that I have not yet added my onions. That was very intentional, because our onions today are super, super delicate relative to everything else that we threw in. So those potatoes and carrots, all of that stuff is going to be a lot more durable and like more capable of withstanding long cooks. So if we were to throw these onions in right now, they would basically just like disintegrate. You wouldn't have anything. It would just fall apart, and they would turn into water. So I'm reserving these onions until maybe the last like 5 minutes of cook time, and that's going to keep those onions nice and tender, so that we don't end up with like onion juice instead of onions. Yeah. Cool. All right. So I'm going to let this curry go. I'm also going to give it a quick stir every once in a while. All right. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in for one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out over on my YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday we did a recipe for a Chinese crepe, which is called a jianbing. And it's one of the things that you'll very often come across in like street food cuisines in Asia. I think it comes from China, actually. I don't think it's actually a Taiwanese street food dish. But it's definitely here. That one is part of a whole series that we've been doing, where it's inspired by things that you'll come across in the San Francisco Bay Area. So that jianbing, is actually inspired by a street food thing that you can get here in Oakland from a spot called Tianjin Dumplings, which the name implies that they have dumplings. They actually only have one dumpling dish, which is wonton soup. And everything else, what they're more predominantly known for is that jianbing. And it's a really, really quick street food snack. It's like handheld. It's kind of like, looks like a burrito because it has a Chinese donut inside of it. So stuff like that, it's all popping up over on the YouTube channel. So if you want to find out what we're probably going to be cooking live next, everything that we're cooking live is inspired by one of the recipes that comes out over on the channel. So every Monday, except for this particular Monday, but most Mondays we'll be cooking through the things that come out over on the channel. So we're not making the jianbing today because I can't eat it for dinner, so I don't want to eat jianbing for dinner. But most Mondays you'll see me cooking through those recipes, and You can also find the whole schedule of everything that's going to be coming out over on the YouTube channel too. So if you're looking for that stuff, definitely hop over to YouTube. Check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun stuff going on, including all of the schedule of live streams. So this one that goes behind me, that's going to YouTube. So if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. We're working our way to 4,500 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. Lots of fun stuff. We have a couple of series that are in progress. There's the Bay Area Restaurants series. That's the one that we just mentioned. There's also a fun series where we've been reproducing foods from TV and film that I've been adding to a lot lately. We did the egg foo young inspired by Aristocrats. We did egg rolls inspired by Rush Hour 2. There's a bunch of stuff inspired by random stuff that happens in TV and film. I've also kind of been diving into like how all of the Chinese takeout that you'll come across on TV is basically the same thing. It's usually like the same like 4 or 5 dishes, and kind of like deconstructing like other things that I can cook that kind of look like those things. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube. Check out some of the stuff that we've been doing. Lots of fun stuff coming up. We have this brand new pop-up. So if you do live in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a new pop-up restaurant called Wu Can Cook, where we've been cooking through all of the fried rice recipes that have come out over on this YouTube channel. And that is happening every first Sunday at the Alameda Antiques Fair. So this coming Sunday, July 4th, we'll be at the Antiques Fair, so come find us. I can only pick one, garlic, onion, or ginger. Probably garlic. I'll be honest, yeah, probably garlic. Because it's like really easy, and you don't have to do very much work. I would leave onion out all the time. I leave onion out all the time. And honestly, it's hard to like imagine using garlic without ginger, but there's definitely a lot of cuisines that are not like Chinese cuisine that you can use garlic without ginger for sure. That's a good, yeah, no wrong answers. That's a good one though. Definitely like outside of Chinese cuisine, I can definitely imagine myself using garlic without ginger for sure. Yeah, cool. So I'm just like occasionally coming here and giving this a stir. The main thing that I'm looking for is I'm making sure that nothing's burning, because we do have stuff that is making contact with that wok. So I'm occasionally going to come over and give that a good stir. Make sure that nothing that's actually touching the wok is going to stick and burn. That's the main problem with cooking a long cook in a wok like this, is that if it overfills and it's not quite filled with liquid in the way that we want it to, it will eventually start burning, so not great. And essentially what we're looking for at this point is we're keeping an eye, the main thing that we're really keeping an eye on is those potatoes and carrots. So if anything is going to undercook at this point, it's going to be those potatoes and carrots, because they take a long time to cook. If you've ever tried to stew a potato or stew a carrot, the reason that you see those in stews so often is because they're really, really resilient vegetables. So you could throw them in a stew and they will hold together for a super long time. So in our case, because we're not really going to go for that long, we're mainly paying attention to making sure that those carrots and potatoes finish cooking. So usually I'll probably break out a fork and start poking them soon. Don't post on the Onion Lovers. I didn't know that that's a subreddit, but of course that's a subreddit. Like, I'm kind of curious, like, what is even the content on our Onion Lovers? What is silly subreddit? No, I kind of want to know if there's garlic lovers. But yeah, no, there's definitely like those 3 ingredients. They definitely like fulfill the same 3 like things in my brain. It's like the whites of a green onion, garlic, and ginger. They all sort of like kind of sit in the same place. Which is why you see me using them at the same time for the same purposes so often. Alright. Yeah. If you mention garlic automod response, that's awesome. Everything is a sub, yeah, that's true. I don't think I've ever come across anything that's like, I don't think I've ever thought like, I wonder if there's a subreddit for that, and there's not a subreddit. That hasn't happened to me in a long time. There's pretty much any time I wonder if there's a subreddit for that, there's a subreddit for that. And it's amazing. It's what makes Reddit so amazing. There's a subreddit for everything. There's a subreddit for everywhere that your brain wants to go, basically. Alright. Oh yeah, those potatoes are nice and tender. I'm gonna drop in my onions now. We're gonna let that go for maybe another 5 minutes. And this might need a little bit more water. I'm gonna give this a little bit more liquid. So at this point, this curry is pretty much ready to go at this point. But last thing that we want to do is make sure that those onions finish cooking too. So I'm going to give it another 5 minutes. Let those onions kind of get nice and tender, and then we should be ready to eat. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more liquid too. I'm just adding a little bit more water here to make sure that nothing reduces too much. You also want to remember that we also have not added our cornstarch slurry too, so that's going to create a little bit more thickness and cohesiveness to our sauce. Oh, I missed some stuff. Your parents just gave you a rice cooker last Friday and it changed your life. Yeah. I also I will say, in contrast to that, I also recently figured out how to cook rice in a wok at really large volumes, and that has changed my life because it's surprisingly easy. It's just as easy as cooking in a rice, maybe almost as easy as cooking in a rice cooker, but it's way faster. Rice cookers take so long, and like you could cook huge volumes in a wok for like a quarter of the time. So I've been doing that a lot lately. But yeah, definitely like. A lot of the times what I actually forgot today, which is why the Zordorishi went off. And it was actually the first thing that I was doing on stream before we started the stream. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll start that rice cooker in the morning, and then it will just hot hold for the rest of the day. And it's perfectly fine. You can let rice hot hold for a day. Is this a Japanese style curry? Yeah. Well, I would call it like probably meeting somewhere in between a Japanese curry and a Chinese curry. So a Chinese curry would be referred to as a Gah-li guy. Or a Gah-li jiao, Gah-li guy. I mean, Gah-li guy is Cantonese. Whereas like a Japanese curry looks very similar. I think that the Japanese curry would be more leaning. This would be a little bit more leaning into Japanese curry because it contains a couple of things that are coming from Japanese cuisine. So it has a little bit of sake, a little bit of mirin. What else do we use? Sake, mirin, and miso paste. Obviously, that's a big one. It's that miso paste. So those are all drawn from Japanese cuisine, whereas that oyster sauce and obviously the soy sauce that's coming from Chinese cuisine. But very similar. If you look them up, a Japanese curry and a Chinese curry, they kind of look almost identical. Mostly has to do with the way that you chop the chicken. That's the thing I've found. And I think a Chinese curry has a few more extra vegetables that kind of make it a little more stir-fry-esque. And then, to me, a Japanese curry, the big thing that the difference maker to a Japanese curry are the presence of those root vegetables. So those carrots and that potato, that's really what defines it as a Japanese curry for me, at least. But yeah, definitely like the original inspiration for the curry that we're doing is inspired by my mom's curry, which I believe was supposed to be a Chinese curry. And I actually did get the original recipe for it, but it's not anywhere close to what we're cooking today. It was so far when I found the recipe, it was not even remotely close to what my mom was cooking. So she had been ad-libbing quite a bit, and I have no idea what she was adding. She still hasn't told me. I don't know what it is. So. Ooh, you would love to see the rice cooking method in a wok. There is not, but that would be a good one. Maybe I'll do that. That's a good idea. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I would definitely. Yeah, I would probably take a shot at that. It's a little bit tricky. The main thing that the hurdle that you have to cross, or I guess at least for me, is that when I'm cooking, usually when I'm cooking that rice in a wok, I'm cooking it on a wok burner. And the problem with that is that a wok burner doesn't go into medium heat. A wok burner doesn't have simmering heat. It's just pretty much just high heat. Which basically means is that you're trying to cook white rice at high heat, which basically means it's probably going to burn. So like it kind of like there's some inherent challenges with working around the fact that wok is not really going to reach simmer temperatures. So that would be a fun video to kind of take a look at. That's probably a series that's a series that I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's like basics in a wok, so we could like take a look at a lot of the like really fundamentals. So like frying an egg in a wok, doing scrambled eggs in a wok, things like potatoes. You can do stuff like that. So that would be a fun series. Wok rings, yeah. Wok ring would be we could take a look at what a wok ring is and the importance of stuff like that. We could also take a look at the wok burner that we've been using. So those are all of the wok burners that we use in the food pop-ups, which are supplied by a really cool group, or really cool company called Wokman LLC. They send us a bunch of really cool wok burners. And I can take a look at that. I'm not sponsored by them at all. They just sent me a couple wok burners and asked me what I thought. And it's like the coolest wok burner that I've ever seen, and we could definitely talk about it. I think that they're live too, so if you're looking for a wok burner, by the way, look up Wokman LLC, and it's some legit stuff. So like the thing that I discovered as I've like really been investigating wok burners more, is that a wok burner, it's not necessarily about how hot it gets, although it is important for a wok burner to get hot. What's more important is that it has good heat distribution, which is really important quality because a wok is very large. So if you have a wok burner that gets up to 200,000 BTUs, but it all just shoots straight up, it's not going to be that useful because that heat is just going to be centered around the bottom of the wok. And then the exterior of your wok, those outer rims, it's not really going to heat up at all. So what the Wokman burner has done is it has all these like really small burners that kind of shoot in all directions, so you get this really even heat distribution that's really useful. So again, I'm not sponsored by them. I have no affiliation with them. I just think that their wok burners are really cool. So yeah, the whole setup would be really great. They've been asking me to do a live stream, but I actually don't have the ability to move the live stream outside because everything is like tethered to this kitchen. I can't move any of this stuff. It's all like plugged into like cabinets and stuff. But I probably could shoot a YouTube video though, and that's been on my to-do list, is shoot a YouTube video for that wok burner because it's super cool. And yeah, I don't want to talk shade, but the other wok burner that we were using is a real piece of crap in comparison. So yeah. Another good food rivalry, yeah, potatoes versus peppers. Or like hash browns versus latkes. Something like that. What a silly concept. All right, here's my cornstarch slurry. I'm gonna add this in bits, in pieces. So I'm gonna add, that's about half of it. What I'm doing is I'm just making sure that this curry doesn't get too much starch, which has been a problem for me lately if you like mismeasure that cornstarch or if it reduces too much. So I'm just really trying to make sure that this doesn't get too thick. That seems okay. And you'll notice that as soon as we added that cornstarch slurry, things are tightening up quite a bit. And I don't think we need all of it. We might reserve the last bit of it. So if you can tell, you'll notice that the cornstarch is kind of causing our curry to tighten up quite a bit. So we don't have that really liquidy quality anymore. It's got this really tight and thick quality now, which is what we're looking for. All right. Ooh. Alright, so the last thing that you want to do, especially when you're doing something like a curry, so you notice that there's all of this stuff stuck to my wok. So when we finish cooking in a carbon steel wok like this, the last thing that we want to do when we finish cooking is that give it a good rinse. While it's hot, or while it's still relatively hot, that carbon steel, it's going to have this nice non-stick quality to it, which happens naturally when a wok carbon steel gets nice and seasoned. So you'll notice I didn't even touch the wok yet. All I did was I gave it a rinse with a little bit of pressurized water, and almost everything came off. So I think we could give it one more rinse. Looks like maybe a tiny little bit of stuff is going to stick. And then what I like to do is I like to reheat it, let some of that water boil off, and then give it a good wipe down. And if you have a nice, well-seasoned wok, pretty much everything should just come off at that point. And then finally, last thing that we want to do, I don't do this after every cook anymore, but I do like occasionally seasoning it with a little bit of oil, and that kind of just prevents everything from starting to rust. So I probably do this after maybe like every 4 or 5 cooks nowadays. But what that's really doing is it's just sort of coating that wok in a little bit of oil, and that's going to stop things from oxidizing, which will happen if the wok stays wet. So that's a little bit useful. I don't do it all the time. Kind of depends on how dry or how used up that wok has been, how much use I've been getting out of that wok. And now it's ready to use again. All right. There it is. Thank you for saving money on takeout. Yeah, I'm glad. I have saved quite a bit of money on takeout too since I started cooking more. I used to order takeout like at least twice a week. That's probably not good. All right. Let's clean up our rim. The rim seems to get most messy when I do things like curries. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to finish with here is a little bit of green onions. Those are the greens of our green onions. And that should do it. I love the zoom lens. So yeah, as a wok season and maintenance would also be great to include. Yeah, there's so many things that we could talk about that's just like basic maintenance on a wok, which would be a super fun series that's not really food related, but just like fundamentals related. And it's also like another thing that I think about a lot is like a lot of like really fundamental things that you can do in a wok. That honestly, in my kitchen at least, because I don't have the best possible pans for the job, it works better in the wok. So when I try and do like really like lacy fried eggs, so for example, so like a good like sunny side up egg, for example, that always works better in the wok. And I do have a skillet for frying eggs, but it's not a very good one. And the wok seems to work much better for that purpose. Because it gets really, really hot and it has this rounded bottom to it, so you can, if you've ever tried to like spoon oil on top of your egg, it seems to work a lot better in the wok. So all those like really, really fundamentals would be fun to dive into. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I've been was planning on doing something like that for a while. Yeah, that's a really good curry. I love this curry. Also, if you haven't ever done it before, making your own curry powder, it's a real game changer. And this is the last of my homemade curry powder, so I'm gonna have to go back to like store-bought curry powder soon. But yeah, it's a real game changer. It makes a huge difference because a curry powder is essentially just a spice blend. And that spice blend, it has a very specific flavor to it. So if it's not the flavor that you're looking for, then it's going to start causing problems, especially if it starts going stale, because then it's not going to taste like anything. And the curry powder blend that I was using was a little bit too spicy for me. So it was kind of like leaning a little bit more into, I believe it was leaning into cayenne pepper, more than I would have liked it to. So I've been like workshopping my own curry powder recipe, which would be a good one to do a recipe for, actually. But yeah, this is the last of that curry powder, and it has like a little bit more mellow. It's leaning a little bit more into chili powder instead of cayenne pepper, and it has a little bit of Chinese spice in it, which I think works really well because it's got a little bit of cinnamon that's kind of popping. So yeah, that's probably something I should check out. So, yeah, cool. Yeah, homemade seasoning. Yeah, totally. Curry powder video, or maybe even like a chili powder video would be a fun one. All these are things that I have gripes with when I like buy them, like from like bulk seasoning, like from like Whole Foods or something. It's because they don't always quite taste like what I want them to. So they're like the curry powder is always a little bit too spicy. Sometimes like the chili powder is has too much lime in it. I don't like when chili powders have lime because it's like a little bit more like bright than I'd like it to be. So all these things. Sometimes they have salt added, which I don't like when seasonings have salt added, because it like kind of makes it harder to season with salt. Yeah. Cool. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And sauces, yeah, that's good. Yeah, totally, and sauces. So that's like actually a big one that I think about a lot is the sauces and like glazes that go into like things like honey sesame chicken, gochujang chicken, General Tso's chicken, all of these things. There's like a very specific way that you have to develop those sauces in order for it to work in a wok. Otherwise, you end up with soggy fried chicken. So that, yeah, thank you. There's so many good ideas. That's a really good idea. Cool. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on the YouTube channel every Friday. So if you're watching on Reddit, there's a YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. That goes to my YouTube channel, which is where we are concurrently live streaming. So there's a whole second live stream that's behind me. That live stream, it has a whole schedule of everything that's coming up next. So if you want to find out what we're going to be cooking next, that's a good place to check out. Lots of fun stuff like that living over there. That's also where all of the recipe videos live. So if you want to find out how to cook the things that we're cooking, there's those recipes, they always live over there. So almost everything that we cook on stream, it has a recipe for that video that goes along with it. This particular Japanese curry was a recipe video that we did, I think it was back in January or February of 2021. And is a part of a larger series that we've been doing, taking a shot at reproducing foods from the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area food scene. So this one comes from a cafe called Bazaar Cafe in San Francisco. So if you haven't checked out their curry, it's sort of like a local legend here in the Bay Area. So it's a fun one to check out. We have a bunch of different series going on. We've also been doing a lot of foods from TV and film, which has been really fun. Kind of like taking a look at like Chinese takeout and why everything Chinese takeout on TV and film and why all of the takeout on TV and film looks the same. There's also another really fun series that I haven't done in a while, but it's like kind of difficult because I have to do it twice. But we've been reproducing a lot of foods from like Chinese American classics and kind of deconstructing some of those classics that come from places like Panda Express and P.F. Chang's. And taking a look at what it would look like to reproduce those dishes in the lens of like a classic, like more traditional Chinese wok fry, and sort of like taking a look at what those wok fries would look like if they weren't Americanized. So things like General Tso's chicken or honey sesame chicken, those always really end up being very interesting because a lot of those things are not Chinese at all. They're just Americans. What we're trying to do is turning American food into Chinese food, basically, which is really interesting. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely find your way over to the YouTube channel. We're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday with new recipes out on Friday, and we're working our way to 4,500 subs. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. I haven't seen Hamcharo in a bit, but please feed Hamcharo. Hamcharo is the hamster that eats ramen, and he only eats ramen when somebody feeds him when you subscribe. So please subscribe. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it is delicious. This is my favorite curry. This one is also loosely inspired by my mom's curry, which she never actually gave me. Or she gave me the recipe, but she didn't really give me the recipe. She gave me the recipe from the cookbook, which is missing basically every ingredient. So, yeah. Cool. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow cooking, I believe we're cooking Kung Pao chicken. Yeah, tomorrow we're cooking up some Kung Pao chicken, which is part of our Chinese American hack series. So tune in tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll see you then. All right, thanks everyone.
If you think that you don't know, never mind that you still don't love yourself. No, you can find it from somebody else. No, everybody's got to go up. Sometimes funny how we shoot the move. Still, will we fight it, baby? Alright, never mind. Yes, I found it now. I'm finally in love with love, and it's bringing me down. You want to be, baby, yes. You want to be, baby. Everybody wants to be different. I still got streets, but they don't love me like they used to love it. And I'm reminded of how bad I used to want it. And yes, I still got streets, but more like I took it of my 20s, and it's breaking me down. You want to be, baby, yes, you want to be. Your strawberry wine. Ooh, yeah. You're as warm as a glass of beer. Darling, I stay the storm on your love all the time. You're as smooth as Tennessee whiskey. You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're bad, warm, glass of brandy. Darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
Nothing